Sudden collapse in NBC studio. Tim Russert sat at his desk in the NBC News Washington bureau on June 13, 2008. The 58-year-old was the face of Meet the Press, America's longest-running television program. He had hosted it for over 16 years, becoming known for his tough questioning of politicians and his thorough research. That morning was like any other workday. Russert had returned from a family trip to Italy to celebrate his son's graduation from Boston College. Colleagues described him as being in good spirits, planning the weekend's broadcast. He had even appeared on WTOP radio that morning and seemed healthy. At approximately 1:30 p.m., Russert walked through the hallway of the NBC Washington bureau, passing editing supervisor Candace Harrington. He greeted her with his customary phrase, "What's happening?" A cheerful greeting he routinely used with colleagues. He then walked down the hallway toward a small soundproof recording booth to prepare voiceovers for the upcoming Sunday show. The booth was a familiar space to him, a routine part of his weekly preparation. Once inside the booth, Russert collapsed to the floor. A coworker immediately found him unconscious and unresponsive and began performing CPR. His body had suffered a massive coronary thrombosis, a blood clot that had suddenly blocked a coronary artery when cholesterol plaque ruptured. The coworker continued resuscitation efforts while others prepared to use the automated external defibrillator that NBC had on site. Emergency services received a call from NBC at 1:40 p.m. A unit was dispatched immediately and arrived at 1:44 p.m. When paramedics arrived, they immediately began defibrillation. Russert had no heart rhythm. After the first defibrillation, his heart was beating in ventricular fibrillation, but then it deteriorated. Paramedics attempted to defibrillate Russert's heart 3 times in total, but he did not respond. They transported him to Sibley Memorial Hospital, where he arrived at 2:23 p.m. and was pronounced dead. Tom Brokaw announced Russert's death on NBC at 3:39 p.m., interrupting regular broadcasting and shocking viewers who had seen him on television just days before. An autopsy revealed Russert had an enlarged heart and had been diagnosed with asymptomatic coronary artery disease, which was well controlled with medication and exercise. He had performed well on a stress test in late April. His physician, Dr. Michael Newman, described him as a model patient who complied with treatment recommendations and exercised regularly. Live news shooting on air. Allison Parker and Adam Ward arrived at Bridgewater Plaza in Monetta, Virginia, just before 6:45 a.m. On August 26, 2015, Parker, 24, was an ambitious reporter for WDBJ-TV. Ward, 27, operated the camera. It was a routine morning assignment, a live interview with local Chamber of Commerce Director Vicki Gardner about tourism at Smith Mountain Lake. The setting was peaceful, the lake glistening behind them as dawn broke. Viewers at home sipped coffee, watching what seemed like just another local news segment. At 6:45 a.m., Parker began interviewing Gardner. Ward's camera rolled, capturing the casual conversation. Neither noticed the figure approaching from behind. Vester Lee Flanagan II, a 41-year-old former reporter at their station, who had been fired 2 years earlier, had carefully planned this moment. Flanagan held grievances against both Parker and Ward, claiming they had wronged him during his employment. He had sent threatening communications to the station in the weeks prior. He waited until he knew they were broadcasting live. At 6:46 a.m., Flanagan raised his Glock 19 pistol. The first shots rang out. The camera fell as Ward was hit. Viewers heard Parker scream before the feed cut to a confused anchor back in the studio. 15 shots were fired in total. Parker suffered fatal gunshot wounds to her head and chest. Ward suffered fatal gunshot wounds to his head and torso. Gardner was shot in the back after Flanagan missed her twice. She curled into a fetal position in an attempt to play dead and survived. Both Parker and Ward died at the scene from their injuries. Their deaths were broadcast live to thousands of viewers before the station could cut away. Flanagan fled the scene in a rented vehicle. At 11:14 a.m., he uploaded his own footage of the murders to social media, a 56-second video shot from his perspective, showing him approaching the scene with the gun. Hours later, around 11:30 a.m., as police closed in during a highway pursuit, his vehicle ran off the road. Flanagan was found with critical injuries and died at a hospital at 1:26 p.m. The video he posted showed his outstretched arm pointing the gun directly at the victims as they conducted the interview, the crew blinded by the television lighting and unaware of his presence until he opened fire. Death aired live on Brazilian TV. Daniele Alves Lopes stood at the edge of the 7th floor of the Centro Commercial Presidente building in São Paulo, Brazil, on July 5, 1993. She was just 16 years old, a receptionist with her whole life ahead of her. The busy commercial district below continued its normal Monday morning rhythm, pedestrians unaware of the drama unfolding above. From street level, a television crew from the popular show Aqui Agora had spotted her. The program specialized in sensationalist, real-time coverage of urban incidents. The building's doorman had called the fire department, and the SBT news team, led by reporter Sergio Frias, arrived at the same time, having been in the area when they received an urgent call about the incident. For approximately 15 minutes, Lopes remained on the ledge, while first responders attempted intervention. A television crew from Aquiagora filmed the entire scene. The incident reached a tragic conclusion around 11 am. Daniela did not survive. Emergency responders provided immediate assistance, but she passed away while being transported to the hospital. Daniela passed away while being transported to the hospital, her injuries proving fatal. Most shockingly, when the unedited footage was shown on Brazilian national television that evening, millions of Brazilians witnessed a teenager's final moments, turning private tragedy into public spectacle. The broadcast caused a 33.5% spike in ratings and sparked national outrage. Psychoanalyst Jurandir Freire Costa called the media vultures, while critics condemned the exploitation of tragedy for entertainment. In 1994, Daniele's family received 1.05 million reais from SBT in a settlement for moral damages, and the incident became a defining moment in discussions about media ethics in Brazil. Radio host shot mid-livestream. Juan Johnny Walker Jumalan sat comfortably in his home studio in Misamis Occidental, Philippines, on the morning of November 5th, 2023. The 57-year-old radio broadcaster was a familiar voice to locals, known for his entertaining program that spread good vibes and humor. His modest setup occupied a room in his house, converted into a broadcast booth with simple equipment. That Sunday morning, Jumalan was conducting his regular program, streaming live on Facebook to his dedicated audience. The familiar jingle of his show played in the background as he addressed his listeners, unaware that his broadcast would soon turn into something horrific. At approximately 5:22 a.m., 3 men arrived at his residence. They claimed to be listeners wanting to make an announcement on his show about lost belongings. This wasn't unusual. Local citizens often visited to share community news. The gatekeeper let them in, seeing no reason for concern. One man entered the broadcast room, where Jumalan was mid-sentence. Within seconds, the intruder pulled out a .45 caliber gun. Before Jumalan could react or comprehend what was happening, he looked up at the gunman and 2 shots rang out. The shot struck Jumalan's lower lip and the back portion of his head. He slumped forward onto his desk, blood immediately visible from the wounds and from his mouth. Most disturbing of all, the Facebook live stream continued as the background music of his show played on. The attacker was not visible on the live stream, but viewers could see Jumalan collapse. The killers took his gold necklace before fleeing on a motorcycle with a third accomplice who had acted as lookout. Family members rushed him to Calamba District Hospital, but Juan Johnny Walker Jumalan was pronounced dead on arrival. The attack was captured on the live stream and later shared widely online. His final moments broadcast live to his community and preserved in digital form. 3 suspects were eventually arrested and charged with murder and theft, though investigators believe the motive was likely related to a land dispute rather than his broadcasting work. Unfortunately, those 3 suspects were acquitted. Brothers executed before TV cameras. Atik Ahmed and his brother Ashraf Ahmed were surrounded by police officers as they walked toward Colvin Hospital in Prayagraj, Uttar Pradesh on April 15th, 2023. Atik, 60, was a former member of parliament with a lengthy criminal record. Ashraf, his younger brother, shared his notorious reputation. Both men were handcuffed, being escorted for a mandatory medical examination. Media crews swarmed around them, microphones extended, cameras rolling. Bright lights illuminated the night scene as reporters shouted questions. The heavy police presence seemed to ensure their safety despite their high-profile status. It was around 10 p.m. Shrikiwau, and the routine checkup was being broadcast live across multiple Indian news channels. As the brothers paused to address the media's questions, 3 young men pushed through the crowd. They wore civilian clothes, posing as journalists with press cards hanging from their necks. They had come prepared with weapons concealed. The police didn't stop them as they approached. Within seconds, the facade dropped. The men pulled out pistols, aiming directly at the Ahmed brothers. The attack began suddenly. The muzzle flashes visible on camera. The crowd scattered in panic, but the cameras kept rolling. Atik was struck first, with rounds hitting his head and chest at point-blank range. He fell immediately. Ashraf was shot moments later, multiple rounds striking his body. The brothers collapsed to the ground. The assault proved fatal, with both men succumbing to their injuries on the spot. The entire assassination unfolded rapidly, yet it was captured in horrific detail by multiple cameras. cameras. Viewers across India watched in real time as both men were killed in the middle of a media scrum, despite being surrounded by police officers meant to protect them. Their killers stood over the bodies, arms raised, shouting "Jai Shri Ram" before being tackled by police. The brothers' bodies remained on the pavement, still in restraints, as chaos erupted around them. Public execution broadcast live. Roberto Giron Mendoza and Pedro Castillo stood blindfolded against wooden poles outside the Canada Penal Farm in Guatemala on September 13, 1996. Giron, 49, and Castillo, 39, had been convicted of the kidnapping, harassment, and murder of Sonia Marisol Alvarez Garcia. Their case had horrified the nation. Now they faced the first public execution in Guatemala since 1983. A military firing squad formed the execution detail. The morning was clear, the air still. Every major television network in Guatemala broadcast the scene live. At least 100 journalists, both local and international, gathered to witness the event. Millions watched from their homes as the clock approached 6 a.m. The condemned men stood restrained as the commanding officer read the execution order aloud, his voice carrying across the prison yard and into living rooms nationwide. At his signal, the soldiers raised their rifles and took aim. The cameras recorded as the sentence was carried out. However, the procedure did not go as intended. According to reports, the execution was not instantaneous. Medical personnel assessed the situation and determined that further action was necessary. The commanding officer had to intervene to complete the process. The procedure was repeated to ensure the sentence had been fully carried out. The cameras captured the problematic execution, the failed protocol, and the extended process that followed. Medical personnel then confirmed that the sentence had been completed. The bodies were subsequently removed from the restraints. The flawed execution sparked national controversy and led the Guatemalan legislature to change the method of capital punishment to lethal injection. This marked the first execution in Latin America, excluding the Caribbean, in over 10 years.